I'm Jennifer Della Quadri, and this is the Raising Happy Teens podcast, where you learn how to successfully guide your teenager into adulthood without losing your sanity in the process. Let's do this. Welcome back to the podcast. I say this all of the time on the podcast here, but parenting a teenager can be really challenging. I think we can all agree on that. And parenting a teenage boy comes with its own unique and special challenges. And that is what I'm going to be diving into in this episode. I'm going to be sharing with you some of the common challenges that come with parenting a teenage boy. And then I'll talk a little bit about what you can do to lay down a solid foundation of trust and understanding with your son. And finally, I'm going to give you some tips on how to communicate with him so that he'll be more open to hearing what you're saying. So if you have a teenage boy or a soon-to-be teenage boy, this episode is for you. And if you have girls, stay tuned because I'm going to be doing another episode very soon, specifically talking about girls. And if you have both, congratulations. You'll get a little bit of both and everything in between. And so one thing I hear quite a bit with the parents I work with and the frustrations that they come to me with is that when their teenage boy starts to hit adolescence, they really feel a difference in their connection with him. It can really feel like your one-time really chatty, really affectionate little boy all of a sudden just doesn't really care about you, doesn't really want to talk to you, is very closed off, and doesn't really want you around. And it can feel that way. It can hurt a lot. It brings up a lot of fear in you. And it can feel like, what's the point? He doesn't need me around anymore, but don't be fooled. I'm here to remind you that he 100% does still need you. He still loves you, and he still wants to talk to you and have you be part of his life, even if it's not really looking like it. In fact, I would venture to say that now more than any other time in his life, it's so essential to build a trusting and supportive relationship with him. Because boys who feel understood and supported by their parents or their caregivers in general, they have better mental health and are less likely to turn to unhealthy coping behaviors. So keep that in mind when you're starting to feel pushed away or you're starting to feel like he doesn't need you around anymore. He very much still does. Stay involved in his life, even if you think he doesn't care or doesn't want you to. And of course, I'm anti-helicopter parent. That doesn't mean to hover. And it also very much does not mean to nag. It means that you are providing this steady and loving, calm support for him as he navigates the ups and downs of life. And that's setting a foundation in your relationship with him. So let's dig into some of the unique challenges that come with raising a teen boy. So like I mentioned at the very beginning, one thing that happens with a lot of the clients I work with and a lot of parents who have a son is that they just suddenly stop communicating, or they are communicating a lot less. They become a lot less vocal. They don't talk about their feelings with you or maybe with anybody, and they really hold it all in. And that just leaves you wondering and guessing, what's going on in there? Is he okay? And it's like feeling your way around in the dark because it has become less normalized for boys to talk about things. Of course, teens in general will pull away from their parents. That's a natural part of their development. But it's also specifically true with teen boys. They really hold back and they are less likely to talk about things with their parents. Another really big challenge that parents of teen boys can face is risky behavior, whether it's reckless driving, unprotected sex, substance abuse, which is more common in teen boys than in teen girls, binge drinking, or any behavior that could lead to violence or injury, whether it be fighting or carrying weapons, or even just participating in unsafe recreational activities. A lot of those things are just normalized for teen boys. And the reason why they're drawn to this risky behavior is because they have external stressors that are really building up, and it's a way for them to let off steam and release this stress and this inner turmoil. And another really common one is there's peer pressure. So other boys are doing it, so they just join in. And also, we've talked about teen brain development here on the podcast quite a bit. A lot of teens have difficulty with impulse control, specifically boys. And if you have a boy who is ADHD, even more impulse control challenges and executive functioning challenges. So they think and then they immediately do. And there's no pause to consider the consequences. Another really big challenge that can come up is anger. I did a podcast a while back, Why is My Teenager So Angry? And I've found in my experience, and also studies have shown, that anger is a more common expression of feelings in boys than sadness and crying, mostly because it's a quote, safer response to a stressor for boys and men. It's more socially acceptable. That being said, dealing with anger and or sadness, they're both difficult to deal with, but anger is a little bit different because it can be very jarring and triggering. It's not as in your face, it's more in your face than, say, sadness, for example. So you can get more triggered by it. It can lead to you being reactive in response as well. Another really big thing that comes up with teenage boys and really teenagers in general is self-absorption. And this is incredibly normal as a teenager. In fact, I think I will be doing a podcast on this in and of itself because parents get frustrated because their teenager is only thinking about themselves. They're not thinking about how it feels for you, the parent, when they're lying to you, or when they don't do well on a test, or when they come home late. Why are you always thinking about yourself? You don't seem to care at all about the consequences on other people. Self-absorption is normal and typical teen behavior because they're more concerned about themselves and what other people are thinking about them. That's one side of the coin, kind of feeling like everyone around them is looking at them and judging them. That can lead to insecurity. And then on the other hand, they may have an overconfidence or like a self-centeredness as a way to cover up these insecurities. Either way, it's all about them. And that can be really frustrating as a parent. I know there are so many more challenges that can come with raising a teenage boy, but these are the ones that really stand out and can be the most challenging to face. Now, let's talk a little bit about things that you can do to lay a foundation of trust and understanding with your teenage boy as he's going through adolescence. And it all really starts with being very clear with him on the limits. So creating rules that you both agree on that are based on your shared values as a family. Talk about that. What are you okay with? What are you not okay with? And why? Give him a chance to share as well. I agree with you, or that doesn't make sense to me, or let's talk a little bit more about this. What's okay and what's not okay? Decide on that together. When emotions are not high, when frustrations are not high, when he's not in trouble for breaking the rules. It's not a consequence. It's just a proactive discussion. And the sooner you do this, the better. So be very clear together on what is and what is not okay, what the rules are. And then I also recommend to write them down in a place where both of you can see them and agree upon them. So they're not just spoken, they're not just out there in an auditory fashion, they're written down. So it's very clear what you've agreed on, and maybe even an agreement that you both sign. We are both on board with this. Now, something that can come up with agreements, and I know this has happened to myself personally, is you have the agreement, you're like, this is awesome, we're all going to follow this. This is what we're looking at moving forward, and then it gets put somewhere in a file or somewhere saved on your computer, and you're like, I don't even know where that is, but I know we talked about it at some point. Let it be something it can be a working document. It can be something that you refer to regularly, but have it be something that is really followed closely and paid attention to, not just oh, check the box. We had this agreement, so that you can refer to it and not just bring it out 2 years later and say, oh, you said that you would keep your room clean 5 days a week. And then he's like, what are you talking about? I barely even remember that. So make those limits very clear and agreed upon, and have it be something that you look at and refer to regularly. The second thing that can be really helpful here is to have very clear and consistent consequences. So be very clear on what's going to happen if these limits are broken, and be consistent with it. And same as before with the limits, agreed upon together. It's not just, okay, if you do this, this is your consequence, end of story. We're talking about behaviors that could come up, the rules that have been set, and fewer rules the better, by the way. Make them very specific, very direct, and if this happens, then this. And we agree upon that in advance. These are going to change over time. Know that. This can be something that you visit once a year. Let's look at the limits that we've had. Okay, let's give you more opportunity to be independent and to, expand without constant rules and direction. But let it be age appropriate. So starting at 13, something that you set for your 13-year-old son is not going to be the same as what you set for him when he's 17. So you're releasing the control as you go, but you're being very clear and consistent with the consequences for what to do when rules are broken. And you're making an agreement about that. And also speaking to the consequences, let the consequence match the behavior. And so they're behavior appropriate. Here's what I mean. So if your son comes home late from curfew, then they lose an hour or time, whatever that amount of time is, off of their curfew in the future for a specific determined amount of time. So that takes out the guesswork. Or maybe a loss of certain privileges for dishonesty. You need to earn back your trust. So we said set clear limits, have clear and consistent consequences. And then number 3, this is so important, is to allow for restitution and restoration when limits are broken. So give him a chance to make things right. For example, let's say, this is something that came up in my parenting group. If you're not in it, definitely join. I'll put the link in the show notes. Someone posted that their son lost the sunglasses that they had bought for him. So they bought him a new pair, and then he lost those sunglasses. And they were talking about what would be a good consequence. Let the consequence fit the whatever it is that happened. And the restitution in this situation could be either they pay for part or all of the next pair of sunglasses. That's part of the restitution. Or when it comes to restoration, let's say he loses his temper at you, yells or slams doors or says something that's not very nice, to have a conversation and give him a chance to repair the relationship after this happens. So it's not just you messed up, too bad, so sad, you're done. It's like you messed up, we all mess up. Let's talk about how to restore from here. And the next thing to lay the foundation is to avoid severe punishment. In fact, I don't even like punishment at all. Take that out completely. But lean toward consequences. And the reason they're agreed upon in advance is so that you don't have to make it up on the fly. So that you don't say something like, you're grounded for 6 months, or I'm taking your phone for a year, right? Before thinking about it. Like, does that even make sense? Or even having a consequence that ends up being more of a consequence for you than it is for them. I know that that's something that can happen a lot. So have the consequence match the behavior or the limit that's broken. Agree upon it in advance. And then have that consequence just set there for you. So you can nuance it as you go, but it really does alleviate the guesswork. So you're not just really penalizing him for something that happened to a great degree. just based on how you're feeling. Now, let's dive into 4 tips to communicate with your son so that he'll be more likely to listen. And as I mentioned in the beginning, the communication breakdown, it seems really hard and it seems like he's never going to listen to you or he doesn't care. And like I said, he does care. He does want to hear what you have to say, but there are ways for you to say them so that he will actually listen. That's the point. You could speak until you're blue in the face and he never hears a thing. And you could say one sentence and it makes a huge impact. So, here are a couple of things to help you stay a little bit more intentional about how you communicate with him so he will listen. Number one is to talk with him while you're doing something else. So, that could be while playing a game or going for a walk, on a drive, or making dinner together. A lot of teen boys find it a lot easier to communicate when they're doing something else at the same time. It really takes the pressure off. So it's not sit down face to face. It's just we're talking while we're doing something. It's like this comfortable distraction is there. And then also along those same lines is don't overdo the eye contact when you're having these conversations because as much as eye contact is good in communication, there's definitely a power dynamic between parents and kids. And the eye contact can feel really confrontational, which is also why talking while doing something else can really help. The second tip is to keep it short and to the point. Some of my clients are self admitted over talkers, they are verbal processors. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you really want your teen, your son, to listen to what you're saying, keep it short, keep it to the point, avoid lecturing, and give him some space to respond to the points that you're making. So this conversation is two-sided. It's not just you going on and on and on about why you're saying what you're saying and why this is important and what he should be doing. By then he's tuned out. He's not listening. He's just nodding. Yes, agreement, agreement. Just please stop talking and I will agree with whatever you say. But he's not actually hearing or really internalizing what's being said. He's just wanting to get out of the conversation. So keep it short and to the point. Number 3, stay calm. Do not react or say anything that you regret. That's your goal. That doesn't mean it's never going to happen. Of course, it's going to happen from time to time. But do what you can to stay calm when you're talking to him. Because the moment he senses frustration, he's going to get defensive or shut down. And you're also modeling for him how to keep your emotions at bay, calm, even when you're having a conversation about something that can be a little bit emotional. He's going to feed off of your energy, good or bad. And he will withdraw or lash out in response to any anger or frustration that he's sensing. And number 4, give him space to process what you've said. And just recognize that just because you said something on Tuesday doesn't mean you're going to see a change on Wednesday if he really heard you. It could take multiple conversations about the same thing for you to see a difference in his behavior or that anything is even really sinking in. But know that he's heard what you said. Give him space to have his own time to process what's going on. And let him just process it in his own way. Keep the door open for him to come talk to you a little bit more if he would like to. And be open to the idea that you may have to say the same thing 100 different times in 100 different ways before something actually clicks or before he actually changes anything. Yes, that's frustrating. Yes, it's hard. And yes, above all, it takes patience. It takes a lot of patience on your part. So pick your battles, decide. That's actually number 5. I think I said 4. I actually have 6. So surprise, 2 bonus ones. Number 5 is to pick your battles. Decide what really matters to you and let the rest just go. And this may mean holding your tongue when he leaves dirty clothes on the floor or forgets to flush the toilet. Yes, that's something that comes up on my coaching calls with many of the parents I work with. So that you can lean into the more important things like honesty, and safety. And number 6 is my very favorite. And if you can do anything from this podcast, let it be this one thing, is to point out the good things you're seeing. Tell him what you're seeing that's good. What's going well? What about him makes you proud? Where do you see him working hard, extending kindness, staying on track? Let him know, and let him know often. All of those things will set the tone for your relationship with him. They'll help him feel understood and therefore more open to hearing what you're saying. So there you have it, kind of dipping your toe into effective ways to approach your teen son. And if you would like a little more support with this, I can help you develop a stronger and more connected relationship with your son. Click on the link in the show notes to schedule a consultation where on this call, we'll just talk about what's going on with you, what you're seeing in your son, the challenges you're having, and I will explain to you step by step how I can help you feel more connected and close with your son in this often unpredictable time of his life. Thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you next time. If you liked this episode, I'd like to invite you to join Raising Happy Teens, my free online community for parents of teenagers, where every week I host Ask a Coach. You bring your parenting questions, and I provide expert advice and coaching. Click the link in the show notes to join today. I'll see you inside.